Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. A banker persuaded a childless waitress to babysit for the evening. And when the rich man's baby launched a quadcopter into the air, the orphan was numb. Lorena deftly and confidently served customers in the cafe, maneuvering between tables and smiling charmingly at customers. Two twin children about 8 years old came out of the back room and began to cranky. "Mommy, soon go home? We're bored." The woman stopped by her sons, pinched their nose and said cheerfully, "Martin, Leonard, what's the mood of the team? What was the deal this morning? Whoever behaves well will get a present from the bunny on the way home. Fair enough. Let's better draw a picture of how we'll go to the river with a tent this summer and catch fish. Mom has an hour left, and then pick up Emily and Laura from kindergarten and go straight home. Let's not upset the bunny." The little ones immediately stopped whining and shone. "We will not. Hooray. We'll go to the river." "That's it, Mom. We're going to paint." The woman winked at them and ran to carry another order. A respectable-looking man watched the whole thing from a distance and directly admired the waitress. She was quick, easy, good with children, and so effective. Appetizing form, a bright red mop of hair and charming open smile. Well, you just can't take your eyes away. No silicone and Botox, you rarely see that nowadays. The man had dinner, and when Lorena came to get the bill, he asked her to sit down for a minute at the table. The businessman began at once and to the point. "Hello. My name is Maurice. I own a business in real estate, and I have a 6-year-old son, Alexander. But my wife is gone. She died 5 years ago. She had a serious hereditary disease. She was not allowed to give birth at all, and she wouldn't have it. Why am I telling you all this, you may ask? Well, I have a huge favor to ask of you. I've been watching you handle both work and children, and I want to ask you to babysit Alexander tomorrow night. I think you'll do well with your experience. These are your twins, aren't they?" Lorena was taken aback by surprise and babbled, "Thank you, of course, but I actually have not 2, but 4 children. There are 2 daughters. They are 4 and 5 years old in kindergarten now, Laura and Emily." "That's quite an unexpected offer, of course." "Why me? You're a well-to-do man. You can hire a nanny. It's quick and easy to do now. And why tomorrow? I have a shift." Maurice began to explain. "Yes, you're right. It's not a problem to hire a nanny, but to find a good person who knows how to approach children, a huge difficulty. Even with my abilities. You know, Alexandra is difficult without a mother. I can buy him everything. But that's just a mother's love you can't buy. And through the agency, then send young Persuaded who are just waiting for the money, yes, to play on the phone, the old pensioners, and tomorrow, because I have very important negotiations, and I cannot not go to them, and the new nanny will not start work until Monday. Don't worry about the shift. I'll talk to your boss and arrange everything. He's a very good old friend of mine. And yes, I'll pay you generously. So, will you do it?" Lorena hesitated at first. This is all very strange. Why do I need someone else's problems? And kids are different. But on the other hand, it's only one night. Why not help someone out? You can see that he is not a bore and not some snob. After all, where there are 4, there are 4, there are 4. And she agreed. "I agreed to help you. But where will I put my kindergarten then? I'll never leave them alone for the whole evening." "That's out of the question." The man smiled. "Of course, what are you talking about? I wasn't going to suggest that. Take your children with you. It's a big house, plenty of room for everyone. My son just doesn't have enough contact with his peers. It would be good for him. It's a deal then. I'll pick you up at 5. Give me the address." Lorraine was busy all evening. The boys' lessons, dinner, then a bedtime story, then a cleanup after the naughty boys. And yet Maurice was never out of her mind. To be honest, she really liked the man. He did not have the arrogance and haughtiness of the rich people. He was simple, smiling, and very polite. And outwardly he was very good, looking tall, stately, about her age, 30. Something. The only thing was that the woman was very anxious. Would she get along with his son? Children of rich people can be very unbearable and spoiled. No one could tell them what to do. Would they make friends with her children? Won't he hurt them? I'm just scared. It was late at night when her children settled down and drifted off. The apartment was unusually quiet. The woman took a bath and stretched her tired legs on the bed, swollen from running all day. Yes, it was not easy to cope and raise 4 children alone. How mortally tired she was of pulling everything on her own. She was like an ant, rolling an enormous stone, and still she could not get up the mountain. Lorena glanced mechanically at the portrait of her late husband on the wall in the frame, and suddenly she felt sad, going over her entire life. Lorena did not know her parents. For as long as she could remember, she had lived with her grandmother Polya. She said that her mother loved to go for a walk and brought her in a ham, and whistled away again to the grooms, there and disappeared, leaving her 6 months. Old daughter in care of her grandmother. The woman was so angry at her good, for nothing daughter that she did not want to hear about her, not even her name. She just cut her out of her life. Of course, Grandma could not buy Lorena expensive clothes or toys. We lived very modestly, but Grandmother was very kind. She never scolded her granddaughter, but always whispered, "Look, Lorena, get married first and then go to bed. Otherwise it will be like with your mother." I don't want to remember. Who does she think she is? We've never had a woman who's had a walker, and here comes the shame. After high school, Lorena went to medical school and moved to the capital to a dormitory. Lorena was a very visible and beautiful girl. There was no shortage of suitors. Metropolitan life overwhelmed by its pressure and noise. Noise. She quickly made friends with her dorm mates, and they often went for a walk. They never had money for a movie or a cafe, so they mostly went to the amusement park. Everything there was inexpensive. She met her future husband, John, completely by chance at an amusement park. She and the girls were having a great time, and he was walking with the babies in the stroller. The children were screaming with rage, and the man was trying to change their diapers. He was all sweaty. His hands were shaking. Nothing worked. "Pretty girls, can you help me? Hold one of the sons, and something I do not understand how the hell this overall's unbuttoned, and who even invented this stupid design." Her friends were frightened and afraid to go near the little ones. But Lorena was no shy, deftly took the baby in her arms, began to hum and rock him. Surprisingly, the boy immediately stopped crying and became quiet, just looked at her with his bottomless blue eyes. The man breathed a sigh of relief and leisurely changed the second baby. Then they switched. That's how they met. The girls' girlfriends had long since run home. Twisting at the temple, when Lorena decided to stay and walk with the little ones some more. The man's name was John, and he was a full 10 years older than 18-year-old Lorena. They wandered the shady alleys, ate delicious fruit ice cream, and he told her about his life. "Thank you, Lorena, for helping me. Surprisingly, usually my sons are very poor in the hands of strangers. But to you just reached out. I raised them myself. It just so happens. I am a fisherman myself. I go on long voyages to the northern seas. The pay is very good. I have my own 2-room apartment. As it happens, I had an affair with a girl, Erica. Nothing serious. I didn't even know she was pregnant. When I arrived, I found out that Erica had died in childbirth, and that the boys, Leonard and Martin, were going to be put in a nursery. I didn't believe it at first, that the children were my children. Eric always had a lot of men. I had a genetic test done and I was the father. How could I abandon my own children? What kind of an animal am I? I took them away, and now I'm raising them. It's very hard. I can't deny it. I have no skills. I'll manage somehow. And if you want, Lorena, come and visit us just for fun. I'd love to, and so would Leonard and Martin. They welcomed you from the first second. We don't live far from here. Though I know you're not likely to come, why should you? As a young and beautiful girl, be such a burden. A whole kindergarten. Lorena promised to come by all means, and she thought it was their first and last meeting. But for some reason, the next weekend, her feet carried her to John's house. She bought the little ones a rattle, baked a cake, and went. When she saw John running around the apartment in his apron, trying to feed the babies and cook meat in a pan at the same time, she felt so bad for him and felt so funny. Something in her soul turned over. The girl came through busily and took everything into her womanly hands. In 4 hands they made it all together, cooked a great dinner, then had tea, then walked with Leonard and Martin, and then Lorena didn't go anywhere else. She stayed at John's. No one understood her. The girls' girlfriends tried to talk sense into her. Lorena, are you crazy? Are you playing at being your mother's daughter? Why do you need it all? Don't you have enough suitors? You're only 18, and he's 30, and he's got babies in his arms. It's a lifelong yoke. You're an idiot, for God's sake. In her mind, Lorena understood, but her heart was no longer hers. She didn't even know who she loved more, the boys or John, but she couldn't imagine life without the 3 of them. A month into their relationship, she became pregnant herself. And so, one by one, she had twins, Laura and Emily. She had to give up her studies, and Lorena plunged headlong into motherhood. And John, to feed such a large family, again began to go on long voyages. He sent money on a regular basis. Lorena was not poor, except that she saw her husband about once every 6 months. At first she missed him a lot, resented the fact that they were not together, but then she got used to it. She learned to be a father and mother to her children, bravely made all the decisions, and was not afraid of any responsibility. A year ago, John died tragically. He was washed out to sea in a violent storm. The widow received only a letter of burial, and her husband's body was never found. The woman, of course, was grieving, but what could she do? She had no right to despair, as after all she had 4 small children in her arms. Child allowances are miserable, so she had to look for a job. But where would she be hired with such a crowd of children? In the cafe she was barely accepted, and then warned straight away that if she goes on sick leave often, they would fire her immediately. She liked her job as a waitress, though she was on her feet, but she could adjust her schedule, and the tips were generous. After 6 months, she was allowed to bring her children with her, if she had no one to leave them with. They were all obedient and did not make her uncomfortable. Her acquaintances had more than once persuaded her not to suffer and to give Leonard and Martin to the orphanage. It would be easier. After all, they were not her blood relatives. But Lorena was terribly indignant and didn't even want to hear about it. She loved all 4 of them equally because she had raised the twins from the womb. How is it possible to imagine such wildness, to take her son by the hand, take him to the orphanage, and leave him there for good? And how could she ever live, eat, and sleep in peace? I live like a squirrel in a wheel, torn between work and my kids. I tried not to lose heart, and despite everything believe in good. The next day, as agreed, Maurice brought Lauren and the children to his country mansion. They began to meet a small, skinny boy named Alexander. Leonard and Martin quickly became friends with him and raced off to play with the cars. And little Laura and Emily were still a little shy in someone else's house. Lorena also felt out of place. Everything unfamiliar, expensive, luxurious, like in some palace. The businessman was already dressed and buttoning the cufflinks on his shirt. He was giving instructions. "Lorena, look, I've already let the cook go for the day, but there is plenty of food in the fridge. You can heat something up. I recently gave my son a real quadcopter. If you want, you can in the backyard to please the kids. Oh, I almost forgot. Alexander is allergic. He can't eat oranges or chocolate. I think that's it. I'll try to be back before 9 p.m. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call." "That's it. I'm on top of you." Lorena waved him off. "Don't worry. Alexander and my twins are already playing. Everything will be fine. I won't let you down." Time flew by. Lorena fed everyone with a delicious dinner, and Alexander asked her to launch the quadcopter. He couldn't wait to show such an interesting toy to his new friends. And nothing to say about Martin and Leonard. Their eyes were burning. Just kidding. When will they ever get a chance to launch a real drone? Everyone went to the backyard together. Even the restless girls got quiet and opened their mouths to see what was about to happen. Martin, Leonard, and Alexander were panting and trying to figure out how to use the new technology, and at last the drone took off. They were hovering around them for a long time. Children were squealing and shouting in delight, and then suddenly Alexander's hand shook. He couldn't control it, and the quadcopter tumbled somewhere behind the grounds. Laura only groaned, and Alexander cried out, "Oh, how did I do that? Dad will probably be angry. I just gave it to him. What to do?" Lorena answered decisively, "So, my dear, I'll quickly run to find our lost, and you promise me that you will play quietly in the yard, okay? And no mischief. Don't hurt the girls. Alexander, you, as the master of the house, are in charge. I look up to you." Proud kid put his hand to his temple. "Yes, to be in charge. Everyone follow me. We'll build a castle of sand for Laura and Emily." And the kids rushed off to the big, beautiful sandbox, and Lorena ran in the direction where the flying gadget fell. She scolded herself. "It's always me. I should not have touched it. And if I don't find it, Maurice will think that I am useless and irresponsible babysitter. One night with the kids and already ruined such an expensive toy." The woman walked around the abandoned neighboring farmstead, stinging all over her feet with nettles, and grumbled, "Well, where's that quadcopter, damn it? Where did it fall?" Suddenly, out of the bushes, went straight at her, a scary-looking, overgrown and unkempt homeless man. She cried out and backed away, thinking he was up to no good, but the old man waved his hands and began to explain. "Don't be afraid. I will not hurt you. Perhaps you are looking for this," and he held out the drone to her. "I wonder if the little one has been playing around. The screw was bent, but I fixed it, and now it is as good as new. Here you go. My name is Melvin." Lorena sighed in relief. "What a fright you gave me." Yes, it was Alexander and the kids were playing, and they couldn't control the car. And I'm Lorena, thank you for repairing it. I'm going to run because the kids are all alone out there." The old man asked, "You must be visiting Maurice. I haven't seen you here before." The woman answered, running away, "I'm keeping an eye on Alexander. He's having important talks today. All right, goodbye." It got colder outside, and Lorena decided that it was time for everyone to go inside for tea with jam and pancakes that she had made. Suddenly, a fancy foreign car drove up to the house, and two glossy, very unpleasant young men began to persistently call and then knock on the gate. Lorena reluctantly went to open it. The man brazenly strode into the yard and began an unpleasant conversation. "Well then, madam, Maurice owes us a lot of money. So now the house is ours, and we will look after his son ourselves. You're the babysitter, aren't you? So go on, get the hell out of here." Lorena, to be honest, was very frightened. Her legs were shaky, but she was ready to tear anyone for the children, so she answered sharply, "And by what right did you enter someone else's private territory? I didn't ask you to come here. You didn't hire me. You can't tell me what to do. When Maurice arrives, then we'll sort it out. And I won't give Alexandra to you at all. I'm responsible for him with my head. Get out of here. Children, all of you, get inside." The young men cackled and started walking towards her. "What are you going to do to us, woman? We're just wondering." Lorena grabbed her phone and started taking pictures of strangers and the license plate number, and then she pointed her finger at random and yelled, "And I'm going to call the police. And then we'll see who's right and who's wrong." And then, as if out of thin air, the homeless man materialized on the doorstep. He was holding a huge piece of board with nails in his hand, waving it and shouting, "Let's go. I have nothing to lose. I'll kill you. Get out," I said. The fellows swore. They did not want any more trouble with the witnesses, and quickly departed. But as a farewell, they said threateningly, "This is not our last meeting, madam. You shouldn't do that. You should not be sorry." As they drove away, Lorena bellowed and sat down on the bench in the gazebo. "Thank you, Melvin. If it weren't for you, what am I going to do?" It is 9 o'clock at night, and Maurice is still not there, and the phone's off. And then there's these. I don't know what I've been going through. Now I have to stay here. I have no way to get back to town, and I'm not leaving Alexandra. The old man said, "That's right, otherwise as soon as you leave, those bastards will realize there's nobody here, and they'll take everything for themselves. Don't worry, there's a security system here. If anything, the alarm will go off, and in 10 minutes they'll come from the security agency. The door is good, the locks are good. Where's the owner gone? Oh, I don't have a good feeling. All right, I won't cave. Good night to you. I'll be right over here, just in case." Lorena answered, frightened. "No, I won't let you go. It's scary enough as it is. You stay in the lodge over there. I'll bring your supper there and make you a bed. I don't think Maurice will scold you. It's an emergency. All right, I'm going inside to calm the kids down. In the meantime, you two get settled in." Lorena wiped away her tears and said cheerfully, "Shurik, Daddy called. He is delayed. Asked me to stay with you longer. Do you mind? Aren't we boring you?" The little boy squealed happily, "Hooray! I'm so nice and fun with you. So with no babysitter, Leonard Martin come and play with the railroad, and Laura and Emily can do puzzles. I've got all kinds. Shall I show you?" Lorena called work and took 2 days off, just in case. Then, as usual, she gave the kids a bath and put them to bed. As there was plenty of room and she didn't sleep a wink all night, she listened to every rustle in that huge and unfamiliar house. She kept dreaming of bandits coming in through the window or into the yard. Twice she went outside. The light in the gatehouse and the two were still on, and that comforted the woman, so Melvin was awake too. A couple more days passed, and Maurice still hadn't shown up at home. Lorena was beginning to panic. She knew something was wrong. He could not have forgotten about her son. She no longer knew how to lie and twist in front of Alexander. Fortunately, he had not noticed anything yet, although he was increasingly wondering why his father had never called him. Before, several times a day. And here, the youngsters tried once more to sneak into the yard and find out how the situation was, but Lorena was already on her guard. They failed this time too. At work they also scolded her badly and said they would fire her. All in all, a total nightmare. Melvin was on pins and needles. We had to do something. We can't just sit around. Maurice is very responsible. He would never just disappear like that. I think I'll go to the surrounding villages and ask around, see if anyone has seen or knows anything. If that doesn't help, you'll have to go to the police, Lorena." This had gone too far. The woman had one question on her mind the whole time. "Excuse me, Melvin, but why are you so worried about Maurice? It's astonishing. You are so concerned about him, as if he were a relative of yours." The old man sighed heavily. "And you have guessed. He is my own son. but I am not a good father, a disgrace. You see, I once had an affair in my youth with a woman, Luba. We even wanted to get married. And then I foolishly went to jail. Well, here we go. I got out, and then again, and so on 3 times. Of course, all my relatives cut me out of their lives. Who needs him? A hardened bastard. So when I got out for the last time, I decided to stop. Found Luba. She was already dying. Cancer had eaten her alive. She whispered to me before she died that my son is the banker, Maurice. That's it. And I purposely settled in an abandoned manor house next door and watched his life, at least one eye on him, and all the time I blame myself for what a waste of my life in the camps. Lorena only shook her head. What a story. A bum father of an oligarch. That's how it is in life, isn't it? Melvin went off to find some trace of his father, while Lorena was taking care of the children in the home of the businessman. She had learned to like Alexander, and he was such a nice, kind, and good-hearted boy, except that all the more he was sad about his father. He missed him terribly. It was good that Martin and Leonard distracted him all the time with games and communication. But in the evening, before he went to bed, he was sure to hug Lorena, and so look her in the eyes and ask the same question. Aunt Lorena, is Daddy coming back soon? You won't leave me, will you? You won't leave me, will you? The woman stroked his russet head, held him close to her, and answered, I won't leave you, Alexander, I swear. And Daddy will come back soon for sure. Do you believe me? And he answered quietly, I believe you. Martin and Leonard are lucky, and Laura and Emily are lucky to have such a mother. You're good and kind, and you love your children. Meanwhile, Melvin wandered from village to village, asking the locals for information. Finally, he got a lead. In the village of Rovenki, some farm workers had found a house which had been empty for a long time, with a car in the yard. The old man waited until evening and decided to check. He peeked over the fence and marveled. It was Maurice's car, so the scoundrels had stolen it and were holding it hostage. Melvin, though he was old and in poor health, now felt as if he had a second wind, for the situation was critical. His son had to be saved. He remembered how in his younger days he had managed to get into every nook and cranny while running away from the police and remained unnoticed. And now at first he observed for a long time and found out that there was only one God, albeit a big behemoth, who sat on the veranda uninterruptedly. Then he peered cautiously through the windows, and in the farthest one he could see Maurice tied to a chair. He was badly beaten and sat motionless with his head down. Something in the old man's heart knit and snapped. His fatherly feelings were aroused in him. He wanted to tear those bastards who had hurt his son. Melvin probed all the boards of the fence and finally found a narrow opening and peeled one of them off. He crawled through it like a pike, found the stairs to the garret, and made his way to the top without making a creak on any of the steps. He got into the house from the backyard and had no trouble finding the right room. The door was propped up by a table on the outside. The elderly man pushed it aside, trying not to make any noise, and quietly stepped inside. Maurice looked at him indifferently and aloof, and lowered his head again, thinking that the man who had entered was also from the gang. But the old man whispered softly to him, I'm not a bandit. I want to help you. Lorena sent me to find you. She's with the kids, don't worry. I'm Melvin, and I live on the abandoned farmstead next door to you. Hold on, I'll untie you. He tried to untie the thick ropes tied to the chair. The old man was soaking wet. He tried as hard as he could, and it seemed to him like an eternity before he was able to do it. Maurice finally stretched out his stiff and numb hands and almost cried out in sharp pain. Thank you. How is Alexander? I can imagine how scared he was that I was gone for so long. Its competitors, they be damned, lured me to an important meeting, and they stole on the road. And I believed him, like the last sucker. Do you know how many people are downstairs? The old man whispered. There is only one, but a very big, big bully. Well, nothing. I think the two of us can handle it. And then the big man, apparently sensing the stirring, decided to check on the prisoner and abruptly opened the door. What a scene! The two strong men were rolling around on the floor, fighting, one blow after another. But Maurice was weakened and his strength was not to his advantage. The big man began to pile on him, and then the bum grabbed a chair and thundered it down on the guard's head. The old man hoped that he would collapse unconscious, and he and Maurice would be able to escape just in time. But the big man just grimaced like a toothache, turned sharply, and went at the old man. Clearly no one had expected that. Melvin grabbed the bottle from the table, smashed it on the corner, and began to fight back, remembering his past. He shot him in the thigh, and he screamed and slowly began to fall to the floor. Maurice and Melvin immediately ran as fast as they could toward the car. The old man did not even notice how the knife of the bully had stabbed him in the back during the fight, and already in the car, the homeless man felt very sick. Something hot started to pour into his back. He felt no pain. He was surprised and touched his hand, and it was covered in blood, and the seat of the car. It was all covered in blood. Maurice cried out, "God, are you hurt? When is the bastard going to sit down? Let's change the route and go to the hospital immediately. I cannot let my savior die in my arms. Hold on." Melvin Semyonovich was getting worse before my eyes. He began wheezing and fainting, whispering as if in a delirium. "Son, forgive me, you fool. I am your father, Obama jailer. But I didn't know, you know. I just recently found out I had a son. I'm sorry." And the old man passed out and never regained consciousness. Maurice ran with him in his arms to the surgery and screamed like a madman, "Help, help me. My father is dying. People, somebody." Frightened staff immediately ran out. There was a commotion. The old man was put on a gurney and immediately taken to the operating room, asking in passing what had happened. The police were called. Maurice called Lorena and told her everything. The woman felt madly sorry for her old neighbor, but she exhaled a sigh of relief. Maurice was alive and well. She hastened to rejoice Alexander. "Shurik, your father just called. He will be home today." The boy didn't even believe it at first. "Really? Can I call him back?" And without waiting for an answer, he started dialing his father's number. He knew it by heart. Finally, Daddy answered the phone. "Son, Alexander, I'm coming today. Are you listening to Lauren? Are you all right?" The little boy couldn't take it anymore and roared, "Daddy, I missed you so much. Come here soon. Lorena is good, but I still feel so bad without you." Lorena hugged Alexander and whispered, "Well, why are you so sad? Dad has arrived. He will be home in the evening. Come on, let's all go cook a delicious dinner to meet the owner. Martin, Leonard, get the eggs in the pot, and Laura and Emily will pour the flour for me. The boys will make delicious dumplings. We'll make one with a surprise. I wonder who will get it?" Kids with excitement went about their business. The day flew by. It got dark outside when Maurice, exhausted by questioning and worrying, finally arrived home. He was so ashamed because the bandits had taken the bank cards and the purse, and he could not even buy Lorena and the children gifts. But everyone was so happy for him. Alexander jumped on his neck, hugging and kissing him, and he couldn't be happy in any way. Maurice took a shower, came into the kitchen, and gasped. Everyone was already sitting at the big dining table. Dumplings were steaming, appetizers and salad smelled. Maurice suddenly remembered that he had not eaten properly for a week for sure. All he had been fed in captivity was some sort of barley and water, and that was not every time. He greedily gobbled up the food. How delicious it was. Then he watched how Lorena was getting along with the children. They were discussing who would get the surprise dumpling. Everyone was laughing. It was as if they were all one big and friendly family. Maurice dreamily said, "How nice it is at home, especially with such a wonderful hostess. Lorena, you are so clever. I don't have words to express my gratitude. And you cook amazing and get along with the kids. And the house is in order. Alexander, let's not let Lauren go anywhere. What about you kids? Would you like to stay longer?" Martin and Leonard were the first to shout, "Hooray! Alexander and I are best friends, aren't we, Alexander?" Alexander was happy too, and they rushed away from the table to play soldiers. And the girls went to play in the hospital, and Alexandra had plenty of toys. At last the adults could talk and discuss everything. Maurice poured a little cognac, and he and Lorena drank it without talking. They were both nervous as hell. The man told her everything. Imagine, I was on my way to the negotiations, and suddenly a pregnant woman was voting on the road. So I felt sorry for her. Why not let her down? She sat behind me and immediately sprayed some kind of pepper spray in my face. My friends ran up, tied me up, and took me to an empty dacha house in the village. And they started making me sign documents to sell the business. I wouldn't do it. Then they started threatening to steal my son. That's what I was most afraid of, to be honest. Thank God, no harm done. Lorena intervened. So they came, they chased me away, and they wanted to take Alexander away. I didn't let them. Thank you, Melvin. He drove them away. You said he was hurt. How is he now? We must go and see the old man tomorrow. A very good man, though he's been in and out of jail all his life. Maurice grew sad and gloomy. It's no good, Lorena. While the doctors are fighting for his life, you know, he told me in a half-dream that he was my father. Do you think it's true? I really didn't even have a father. Lorena only sighed. I don't know. He told me the same thing, that he found out by chance that you were his son. So he looked after you in the neighborhood, and he was ashamed to tell you. A convict and a bum on top of that. You know, I grew up with my grandmother. My mother was no good. I didn't know my father at all. If my dad had turned up, I'd have been happy. It wouldn't matter if he was a convict or a bum. The main thing is that we're soulmates, the same blood, you know. Maurice was even touched. Yes, Lorena, I understand. If it turns out to be true, I'll be happy. Even if he's a jailer, even if he hasn't been around all these years. But he's there now. He saved my life, and now he's a hair's breadth away from death. Tomorrow morning we will go to the hospital. I'll ask Angelina, the cook, to baby. Sit for a couple of hours. Now may I go and lie down? You made such a good meal. And Lorena, please stay here for a while. With you and the children, the house just came to life. And Alexander is so happy. I've never seen him like this before. Everyone kept telling me he had trouble communicating. And I see him playing with your kids, and he doesn't have any problems at all. Lorena nodded in agreement and went to put the children to bed. In the middle of the night, she suddenly heard a scream from Maurice's bedroom. She was frightened to death. For some reason, the thought of bandits came into her head, and as she was, in one thin nightgown, she rushed there, thinking only of the fact that nothing had happened to him. Quietly, she entered the room. Maurice was thrashing around in a cold sweat on the bed and screaming in a nightmare. I won't sign anything, and my son will not give you. Is that clear? You can kill me right here. Daddy, don't die. Please. Live. Lorena crouched on the edge of the bed and touched him by the shoulder, whispering softly, Maurice, wake up. You are dreaming just a nightmare. You are home. He immediately opened his eyes, frightened, and began them now, not understanding anything. Fool. Lorena, it's you, or else I dreamed that the bandits still have me. The horror. Then I dreamt of my father dying. My God, you're so beautiful, you're like a goddess. You can't take your eyes off me. And suddenly, without asking her permission, he buried his lips greedily into her. A frenzied wave of passion swept over them both, and Lorena no longer understood anything, only gave herself to the tenderness and assertion of such a desired and strong man. In the morning, Maurice whispered softly in her ear, "That's it now, you're mine. Only my woman, you hear. I will not give anyone, and never such a treasure. Do you agree?" Lorena smiled blissfully and nodded. She had never felt so good with anyone. After breakfast, Maurice and Lorena went to the hospital. The attending physician gave them some distressing news. Melvin's life, unfortunately, still hangs in the balance. We wonder how he is still alive with his vitals. He's lost too much blood. We have to find a donor immediately. Maurice didn't hesitate to reply, "I agree. He's my father. So I have to match him as a donor. I don't want him to die. Daddy saved my life." Maurice had the necessary tests taken, and Lauren just in case too. The nurse came out of the lab and shocked everyone. "You, Maurice, are not a match, and you are hardly related to the patient. The blood types are completely different. But you, Hope, can help him, and your blood type and H factor are the same. So, will you be a donor?" Lorena agreed. She felt pity for the unfortunate man who had been beaten by fate. But the words of the nurse did not give her peace, and did not go out of his head. Why had she said that? Already in the corridor, she suggested to Maurice, "You know, things have become so complicated. Let me, you and Melvin bring in the genetic material for analysis, and see if we can find out if you are related or not." Maurice was surprised. "What about us? Why would you want to do it?" Lorena answered, "For comparison, it will be clear that I'm certainly not related to him. Just let him recover a little." She and Maurice took turns in Melvin's room, and after a day, thank God, he was relieved and the crisis had passed. Slowly the old man began to recover. He readily agreed to the examination, for he was sure Maurice was his son. Alexina on his deathbed could not lie. With such a thing, do not joke. On the contrary, he was glad. This fact will be officially confirmed, and he and his son will not be separated. Lorena was just curious. She had nothing to do with the family's history. But still curious, was the tramp really Maurice's father? And so, 3 days later, Maurice picked up the results of the examination and came with Lorena to his father's room. He said cryptically, "Well, Daddy, the moment of truth." Open and read, "What, who? How can that be? How are not related? And how is Lorena's daughter?" What is this nonsense? Are they in their lab? Are they full of henbane? Lorena didn't understand, so she snatched the result from him and began to read it aloud. Maurice and Melvin, degree of relationship, 0%. Lorena and Melvin are 99 and 9/10% related. Lorena cried and kissed the paper, and Maurice couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could it be? It turns out that the old man got it all wrong. Out of his mind. Why, after all, in his mind? Why, after all, in his mind, Maurice had already accepted the idea that he had a father. And now what? Melvin huddled in his bunk and babbled frightened, "I don't understand. There must be some mistake. They definitely told me she had my son. Could not really mess up something in your lab. I don't believe it, that's all. A man can't lie when he's dying. It's a great sin." Maurice suddenly said, "You know what? I'll ask my old friend Scott, a familiar investigator, to turn over the past. Otherwise, I'll just die of curiosity if I don't find out where the truth is, and who is the son of whom." So we did. And this is what we found out. It turned out that Melvin had been in a brief relationship with Alexina. She was a woman of the wind, a promiscuous woman who did not count her suitors. When the gentleman suddenly went to jail, Alexina found out she was pregnant. Until the last stall, she did not have an abortion. She gave birth to a girl, Lorena, and dumped her off to her grandmother for upbringing. That's the whole story. And when Melvin asked her about it, she lied in anger that she had a son and a banker. She thought she'd be tortured, and Lorena had never even seen her mother. She ran away from home. Her grandmother burned all her pictures. She couldn't forgive her shameless daughter. So it was not Maurice, but Lorena found an unexpectedly native daddy. The woman was very happy, not at all ashamed of him. She had missed all these years a man by her side just to consult, to talk heart to heart. Maurice took it as it was, though he was upset, of course. After he was discharged from the hospital, Melvin was immediately taken to his family. There would be enough room for everyone. Lorena took care of his father, dressed him, gave him shoes, gave him a haircut, and examined him. In that short time, Melvin had changed from an unkempt bum who frightened away passers-by with his beard to a decent-looking, well-looking old man. The children immediately loved him, accepted him, and called him Grandpa. Melvin was the happiest of all. He never tired of thanking his daughter and Maurice. Lorena, thank you, and thank you, Maurice. I thought I was going to die under that fence at that old abandoned farmhouse. I thought I was worthless, and my life was worthless, and my life was worthless. I'm sorry I wasted my life. I'm not worthy to be your father. Lorena was angry at this kind of talk. Dad, stop it. I don't want to hear it. I love you, whatever you are, do you understand? That's it, let's forget the past. Cross it out and leave it. We live now. Why don't you come have dinner with us? I baked a cabbage pie. It's huge. My grandmother taught me that when I was a child, after the whole family had eaten, Alexander came up to his father and said, Dad, can I talk to you for a minute? We have a serious talk man to man. Maurice even choked up. He hadn't expected such a thing from his son. But he didn't laugh and said, Let's go. Let's go talk if we have to. Lorena, I won't be long. Don't be bored without me. Alexander, Martin, and Leonard went out on the veranda. And Alexander was the first to start an important conversation for them. Dad, the men and I have consulted, and we have decided that you are not behaving properly. You need to think about your behavior. Maurice almost choked with laughter, but restrained himself, made a very serious face, and clarified, What's the problem? What do you have a problem with my behavior? Let's sort it out. Did I offend anyone? Alexander sighed and continued, Yes, you did. You offended Lorena. Why don't you ask her to marry you? That's no good. We were watching a program. I want to know everything. Even the little girls there said they wanted to get married when they grew up. I wish I had a mom like Lorena. Otherwise she'll resent you. Martin and Leonard also said timidly, Our mother loves you, that's for sure. She's never been so cheerful and happy as she is now. And she doesn't cry at night anymore. We like you too. We agree to call you Daddy. So are you going to get married? Maurice was dumbfounded. He thought that Alexander and Lorena's children were such babies, and it turns out they are already so much talkative and knowledgeable about life. Worried. That's how it was. He guiltily excused himself. You're absolutely right, guys. I'm the fool. I'll fix it tomorrow, and you're going to help me do it. This will be our man's secret. I really love your mom, and I want to live with her all my life. You're all my family now, okay? And I'm responsible for you. So what do you say we surprise your mom? Get the girls on board, but don't say a word to Mom. Grandpa can join the team too, so he won't be bored. The next day, as usual, Lorena was busy with the house and the household, watching the children. After lunch, she had a terrible headache, no strength left. When Martin noticed she was clutching her head, he said, "Mammy, go lie down and take a nap for an hour, and we'll quietly watch cartoons in the living room. We promise not to shout and not to be naughty, She kissed her son and said, "Thank you for your concern. Okay, I'll really lie down. I just took a pill. You're in charge, okay?" And the woman went into the bedroom. Alexander immediately called his father at work. All according to plan, come quickly. We barely got her to bed. Lorena did fall asleep instantly, and she herself did not notice how she fell asleep for a whole hour and a half. She jumped out of bed in horror and listened. There was suspicious silence in the house. Oh my God! For sure something has happened. It can never be quiet with that many kids. How did I fall asleep for so long? I was just going to lie down for 10 minutes. Lorena ran out into the living room frightened. She was immediately taken aback. She didn't even realize where she had gone. The whole room was literally strewn and littered with the most beautiful baskets of roses. Scarlet, white, delicate pink, and even purple. Maurice, in a suit, got down on one knee, took an engagement ring out of a box and said, "Lorena, my dear, we have known each other not so long, but you have already managed to become for me so close, dear and irreplaceable. I love you, and I want, as a man should, to ask for your hand and heart. Marry me. All the children, and we have 5 of them now, are my relatives. I won't hurt anyone, and I'll love everyone equally. Do you agree?" Dazed Lorena even cried. It was so solemn and beautiful. She nodded her head and hugged Maurice and whispered to him, "I agree. I love you too very much." Suddenly there was a burst of applause from behind. All their children and Melvin came out. Satisfied, Alexander was holding the video camera. "There. That's better. It's a keepsake. Congratulations." The others shouted joyfully too. "Hooray! We're a real family now. With Mom and Dad and a Grandpa, just like everyone else. And let's go eat a cake." Daddy bought a huge one. Melvin went over to his daughter and gave her a fatherly hug. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you all. I feel so good here. I have never known such warmth and comfort in my life. And now it feels like heaven. Be happy with Maurice. He's a great man. You can't go wrong with him. I know that for a fact."